Hello, welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top local, national, and world stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Sean Kalin with the WHS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of religious leaders. Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church, Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ, Reverend George Wasson, Faith Point Church, Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church, and Rabbi Emerita Gaylia R. Rooks, the Temple. We begin this week with President Trump's proposed plan for Gaza.
Tonight, 24 hours after President Trump declared the U.S. will take over Gaza and that the Palestinian people would be permanently moved to other countries to a, quote, beautiful area with nice homes, the White House today struggling to explain how the plan would work.
Can we ask about your Gaza proposal? A lot of people are talking about, obviously. Everybody loves it.
But today, international outrage after the president announced the United States would seize control of war-torn Gaza.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site, and get rid of the destroyed buildings.
Trump says the nearly 2 million Palestinians should permanently relocate to Egypt and Jordan, though both countries reject that notion. The condemnation in the region swift, including from Saudi Arabia. The Trump administration is hoping the Saudis will normalize ties with Israel. Today, the Saudis saying that won't happen without a Palestinian state, that their position is firm and unwavering. Now, Trump administration officials seeming to dial back some of the president's language. Secretary of State Marco Rubio acknowledging the plan is real, but implying Palestinians would be able to return.
So what he's very generously has offered is the ability of the United States to go in and help with debris removal, help with munitions removal, help with reconstruction, the rebuilding of homes and businesses and things of this nature, so that then people can move back in.
We've seen the pictures, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians determined to get back to their homes in Gaza. But today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt insisting.
This is an uninhabitable place for human beings. Do you really think that families can live their dream in a region that looks like this, with no running water, no electricity?
So panel, we turn to you. What are the moral implications at play here when it comes to support or opposing policies that prioritize peace while also addressing the ethical concerns of human rights, justice, and sovereignty?
Yeah, I think there's several moral issues that come into conflict. The right of self-determination of a people to govern themselves, the right of Israel to be safe and secure and to defend its citizens. I'm not really hearing a lot of the details of the plan. So it's hard for me to come down one side or the other. I don't want us to get into a nation-building mission. If we're going to own it, it becomes, what, a territory of the United States, like Guam, which would be similar to Guam, 4 letters, starts with G, and it could be in the same file drawer. So it's really, I'm up in the air about it, confused about it. If the same actors are going to return, you're just going to clean up the mess and give an opportunity for a greater mess and make Israel less secure.
Well, I think this is first of all, I think that it is an incredibly immoral suggestion. I think that, I don't know who the president discussed this with beforehand, but I can't imagine anyone being happy with it, not even Israel. Self-determination for the Palestinians, I've always been an advocate of the two-state solution. I don't think we've ever been further away from it. Prior to October 7th, I think some 80-something% of Israelis were in favor of that, but now the number is much lower. But Saudi Arabia has immediately said, that they were so close to normalizing relations with Israel, and that would be a wonderful thing. That will not happen under this plan. Egypt, who has been Israel's, that was the first Arab nation to make peace with Israel. It's been decades. It's a cold peace, but it's a holding, lasting peace. And there's no way they're going to agree to this. They never wanted those refugees to begin with, even when they had control of that area. I could go on and on and on. Reasons why it's impractical, immoral, and so offensive. I think the only thing I can say is that in the back of my mind, to me, it's something that Trump just threw out there for the shock value, and maybe it's hiding something else. Because you know how there's always something new. You can't even get over the outrage of one thing when something else comes up. So maybe this is to help take away from what's happening with the FBI and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Department of Education and the DOJ and all the rest of that. Maybe this is just to draw some attention away. Or maybe it's because something else is coming down the pike. One never knows.
I think one of the things I was thinking about with the proposal that I think is, it's not a plan yet, it's not a project yet, but when we look at the history, that area has been a powder keg for who knows how much time. 90% of the population has been displaced. 170,000 of the buildings have been leveled or destroyed. There's not much left. I was reading a United Nations report that said it will take 14 years just to get the rubble removed. The United States is the highest contributor of aid in the world to peoples in need. And so when I heard President Trump talk about this, one of the things that I thought about was, there's an idea. There's something else coming out on the table. Maybe that will serve as a catalyst for additional ideas. Oftentimes our initial plan doesn't end up being the actual plan that gets played out. But even Netanyahu said, I applaud his thinking outside the box, looking at what might there be some options. I heard on the news this morning of, President Trump is playing like 3D or 4D chess. So he's trying to look at this in so many different ways. And maybe that's one of the things that's needed, because this has gone on for so long. There's so much pain. There's so many troubles, so many difficulties there. I think we need to think outside the box.
Jamesetta?
I have a difficult time talking about anything that is coming from this White House. And he talks about America first, right? And yet we're in a time where it is almost as though he is like Putin wanting to have the Soviet Union all over again, where we're going to take over Gaza, we're going to take over Greenland, we're going to take over the Panama Canal, we're going to just take over Canada and Mexico and the Gulf. And it could be rhetoric, but it is causing harm and fear, unnecessary fear to people around the world. And for me, what makes it all right to think that our way of life should become the way of life for the Palestinians and for the people of Gaza? What is, while I know that there is a lot of destruction, it is their home. And they have a right to rebuild it in a manner that is based on their culture and customs, not on the United States of America.
I would like to see a revitalized Gaza with international cooperation, that because basically so much of it was destroyed. So to rebuild the infrastructure, not so much that the United States would own it and then other countries would pay for it. That was a statement made that I didn't quite understand that. I don't know how that would work. But rather, a rebuilt Gaza for the people who have lived there, many of them refugees from 1948 and who were moved there. And with international cooperation, hopefully cooperation from Israel and also Saudi Arabia together, which would be nice, and maybe other countries around, making that, maybe with also the leadership or at least the assistance of the United States to rebuild the infrastructure for home. And then the infrastructure there would not only be brick and mortar, but also an infrastructure of peace. I think that such kind of aid like that would maybe weaken Hamas and its sort of destructive tendencies, but rather lead to a people who would move towards flourishing, which would be good for the area. I don't think having the United States having, say, a military presence there or another kind of presence there would be good for the United States. And I don't know if it would be good for the area as well. But an international presence that would be peace building and also infrastructure building would be good. It would take planning and a lot of time.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money.
And
yes,
that was one of the things that
yes.
Trump had said,
Yes.
you know, no more nation building, no more, you know, giving all.
I agree, and I appreciate Jamesetta and Gaylia, you all confessing your perspective on this, that you automatically would reject anything that the president would suggest. I think we, I'm a sports official, I'm going to hold for the advantage and see how the play develops. Certainly, something needs to change in the approach to the chaos in the area. Hamas, since 2008, wants the chaos. They want the disorganization and the lack of structure and all the problems they can stir up there. Something needs to happen without Hamas. Something needs to happen that's different. And at least we have a what I would call a bold and creative approach. I think President Trump and Prime Minister, is it Netanyahu, would be more than willing to listen to other options and to involve other nations. Hold for the advantage is my suggestion.
That's what I was referring to as well, thinking that and hoping that this really would serve as a catalyst for something. Mm-hmm. You know, it seems like we have been, you know, what is that definition of insanity? We keep doing the same thing that we've been doing, expecting different results. And this is not a 5-year problem or a 10-year problem. This is a many, many year problem and many, 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 many millions and billions of dollars that has been poured into in all different kinds of aids, from military aid to humanitarian aid and everywhere in between. Well, something's got to change. New ideas have to come to the forefront. We can't just keep doing what we've been doing and pouring all these dollars and resources and things in there and not getting any results from any of that. Again, is this the right answer? I don't know. I think it's an idea, and again, hopefully that would serve to generate and create additional ideas to see what would be the best solution for the people who live there. Again, many of whom, 90% of whom, are displaced now.
Okay, so we're willing to put dollars for infrastructure, for Gaza, for people there, but we want to take it away through the USAID. We want to take it away on one hand, so that people don't have the resources that they need in order to have a healthy life, and we're going to take it away from third world countries that need that support, but we're going to put it in Gaza and build infrastructure or housing or whatever, or resorts or whatever.
Is that a statement or a question?
I'm just making a statement.
Well, then I guess there's no answer to it. My suggestion is we'll talk about USAID in a moment. But
we can move to it right now. It was a good segue.
Can I just say one thing? I just want to add to what Jamesetta was saying American lives. It's one thing to talk about putting American money there, but when you talk about the military, I can't imagine that many Americans would be happy with the idea of American soldiers having to go into Gaza, into that whole region, which is, as has been said, a tinderbox. And, well, it's just, you know, no more nation building, no more USAID, no more this, that, and the other. And that this is completely the opposite of that. So it's...
So you're in favor of Hamas and the Palestinians remaining in place in Gaza and Israel continuing to have to deal with them. Is that's what I'm hearing?
No,
Okay.
Just because I don't like this answer doesn't mean that there's not
Okay, then
hopefully a
let's
better
wait
answer.
and see what the full answer is, or other answers that come. I think that's all that I'm saying. I don't know, I can't speak for George, but.
So let's turn to the topic for you. It's been brought up a couple times, so let's just move there now. We have about 12 minutes left in the show. We turn to the topic of USAID and the decision this week to pause all activity and move it under the State Department.
I think it's outrageous.
This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like.
Reactions pouring in, both of outrage and intrigue.
I'm eager to see an audit and see the sort of mismanagement that the Secretary of State has told us about.
This is two unions representing federal employees filed this lawsuit against the Department of Treasury for sharing confidential information with the Department of Government Efficiency, aka DOGE, and Elon Musk. The lawsuit just hours after Musk shut down the U.S. Agency for International Development, known as USAID, and told staffers to stay home.
People like me who had access revoked didn't even get this email to not come in. I heard about that through the grapevine.
Elon Musk has said he had support from the president to shut it down.
Finding tremendous waste, probably fraud and abuse can be added to it.
I think Elon Musk also has a little bit of common sense, and I think the American people really appreciate that when it comes to the federal government, because it seems like all common sense has been lost in this city, and that's what you see when you look at USAID.
But some flat out disagree.
What Trump and Musk have done is not only wrong, it's illegal. USAID was established by an act of Congress, and it can only be disbanded by an act of Congress.
So balancing the need for ethical accountability of taxpayer dollars with moral imperative to provide humanitarian aid to those in need. Your thoughts on this discussion this week with USAID?
First of all, we need to remember what the name is and how the agency developed. I'm not going to get into a long history of it. It's United States Agency for International Development. The aid part is not, yes, they have shots of bags of rice going onto ships in certain areas, and those things are done. But there are some, the agency has developed initially as a response to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Cold War's over, with the Soviet Union anyway. Soviet Union doesn't exist since 1991. The use of funds, all it is a pause on the expenditures for 90 days. It's not a removal of any expenditures or anything like that. And the employees are on leave, except those who are mission critical, and they remain on salary and working. But it is simply an effort to audit and see what's going on with the expenditures of this agency. Like in 2010, the $4.4 billion that was funneled through the Clinton Foundation to Haiti that was expended mostly in cash without any receipts. Or the $4 million that went to the lab in Wuhan, China, right before the COVID outbreak in throughout the world. Or the $22 million, now you all might like this, $22 million to study climate change on Mars. So there are various different just off-the-wall misuses of taxpayer money. I think federal agencies have a responsibility to be good stewards of taxpayer money and to reflect what the voters have put, the policies for which the voters have voted and support.
Well, let me see if I can do a comparison here. I run a nonprofit, and we are just beginning to have an audit. of our nonprofit. We have it every year. So what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that things can just be put on pause while there is an audit to make sure that everything is handled well, right? So that means that employees are laid off. That means all programming stop. Everything that is being done for the community is paused for 90 days while we have an audit. That is not how things are done.
That's how things had to be done here because, first of all, they weren't. They were put on leave. They weren't laid off, the workers, and secondly, they would not cooperate with an audit. Your nonprofit cooperates with an audit. I'm presuming. I know the Crusade for Children does. So there's just a lot of fiduciary irresponsibility going on in that agency.
Okay, well, so where is that information to prove that they were being uncooperative?
They weren't allowing access to do an audit.
And where did you get that information?
Well, I didn't talk directly with the president, but where did you get the information that you're presenting? I mean,
well, I'm just asking a question because it just makes, they could have done an audit and without putting people on leave, without stopping services, they still could have done an audit of the agency.
Absolutely, it's a federal
not when
agency.
the agency, but they were resisting the audit.
Then you deal with that. You can't, I mean, there's a right
He
to do
is.
it. Well, by closing down the entire organization and putting everyone on leave.
That's an idea.
There are people that are hurting as a result of this. There are people in third world countries that are not receiving the aid that they need in order to live. 90 days is a substantial amount of time to go without nourishment and whatever else support, the health care that they are receiving.
It's an idea to pause the agency like that, but it's not a good one in my opinion. I think that there's too much shock and awe. I don't think it communicates well. I think it may miss the subtleties of what USAID does in the larger world for good and for the good of our nation. One of the things I've learned about it in this past week is that in the history of the agency, as it goes back through the Cold War, the agency would serve administrations that were both conservative and liberal. And when it served either one, or when there would be an ideological change, the leadership of the agency would change and its policies would change over time following the directive of the particular administration. It would not pause, but basically change in its directives and some of its expenditures that would shock the other side would stop, and or shock the administration, they would stop and new ones would start, and those more favorable to liberal or conservatives, and they would move. But the general direction of serving our own policy, our own interests, and also the very human interests of the world, they would continue to happen. I think that that's good. I think when you do closing down a whole system, you're going to miss some things, or you're going to hurt some things in ways that are just not known. Because to me, this decision feels as if it's on a whim. It doesn't feel planned out to me. I'm not so sure, but it doesn't seem like a good one.
I think one of the things that we see is that one of the realities is the bad choices of a few, again, we don't know the number, but the bad choices of a few often impact a greater number. And I think there's so much distrust. I think there have been so many flags that have been played on this to try to figure out what exactly is USAID doing, where are the dollars going, what kind of aid are they actually doing that is empowering people and raising up people. Senator Joni Ernst tried to bring this before the Senate and was shot down before, of saying we need some fiscal accountability and responsibility. As ministry leaders, we are all in charge of stewarding the resources that God has placed into our care. And we know that sometimes that means very hard decisions have to be made. Now, if we agree or disagree on whether it's a pause or a close, we're going to have to see how that plays out. But you know, we all deal with limited resources, with limited amounts of money that we can deal with, and if this is raised to the kind of the breaking point or the tipping point, which we often refer to things, is taking a pause, saying stop, let's look at everything. If they're not being allowed to do the audit, if it's being refused or blocked in some way, obviously an end run needs to be done around that to try to figure out what's going on. And I guess I'm hopeful that, again, I see this. I don't think this is purely reactionary. I think this has built over time, and really wanting to get at what is USAID actually doing? Is it doing what its intended purposes were when it was started during the John F. Kennedy days? Is it actually fulfilling its purposes? And again, I think some of the reports that we're seeing about things from pottery to different kinds of programs, there are some things that aren't being done well. How much of that? We won't know until a complete audit is done to figure out. And unfortunately, it hurts the people who need it the most. And I wish that wasn't the case, but I'm not sure that there's a better answer right now other than pausing to do that full fiscal accountability and review.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul has been at the forefront of calling various agencies into account, and he's been laughed at as an extremist. In 2016, President Obama sent $1.4 million of cash, it had to be cash, on pallets to Iran, and that was funneled through USAID. I doubt it helped anybody.
I think every institution in the government, everyone needs an audit. They all need to be reformed, always. And a good business practice is continuous improvement. So you always look to do that. And our current administration has the right to align that agency according to its ideals. And they may not serve ideals of other kinds of philosophies, but they have the right and the right to audit. But it doesn't, I don't think it means that you pause or stop aid to people in need. I don't think that bad should happen.
I hadn't heard that they didn't allow an audit to happen, and I would even understand we're going to freeze your funds until you give us access to an audit because, you know, we're responsible for the money. But saying, oh, 3 months and everyone is locked out, and you know, you could say that there's graft and misspending and wasted money in any government agency. I don't question that, but there are intelligent, humane ways to go about investigating and improving.
And we'll have to end it there. Great discussion this week. Thank you to our panelists, Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church, Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ, Reverend George Wasson, Faith Point Church, Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church, and Rabbi Emerita Gaylia R. Rooks with the Temple. Thanks for watching us. Enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. We didn't get to our picks today, but maybe next week they'll come back and let us know who they were going to pick. And we'll know. That's it for us on this week's Moral Side of the News. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week.